How does waste impact wildlife in Michigan? For today's Craft and Chat, join us for a discussion of microplastics, a hidden threat to wildlife, and we'll discuss some of the ways that we can help. And then Camille will be joining us to show us how we can transform some of our everyday household plastics into backyard feeders for wildlife. 91% of plastic waste in the United States is never recycled. 22 million pounds of plastics enter the Great Lakes each year. And plastic debris makes up 80% of the litter on the Great Lakes shoreline. And did you know that 90% of the plastics on Michigan's shoreline are microplastics that we can't even see? Microplastics are plastics that are less than 5 millimeters in size and are often hard to see once they get into the waterways or mixed in the sand on the shoreline.
Microplastics are appearing everywhere in the environment, from falling snow in Colorado to drifting snow in the Arctic, as well as all 5 of the Great Lakes. And we see an effect on the life living in these aquatic systems. In one study, 85% of the fish caught in 3 Michigan watersheds had microplastics in their digestive tracts.
So what's wrong with microplastics? Microplastics harm physical environments, threaten wildlife, spread pollution, and interfere with human use of aquatic systems.
Plastic litter may entangle wildlife, impairing the mobility to avoid predators or find food. Physical injuries may cause death or ill health that affects migration or breeding, which can also have impacts on our human fisheries. We have all seen the pictures of turtles, fish, and marine mammals who mistake a plastic bag or a bottle cap for something edible. These larger plastics can get stuck in the gut and cause choking or starvation. With microplastics, the dangers expand to include microscopic tears in the gut lining and greater likelihood of chemical exposure. The chemicals of greatest concern often fall into the category of persistent bioaccumulative toxins, PBTs for short. These chemicals persist in the environment for a long time, accumulate in body tissues, and are toxic. Familiar BPTs are DDT and PCBs. Some of these chemicals are part of the plastics themselves, others are absorbed from the environment. As the smaller plastic particles form, they have greater surface area to absorb chemicals, making the microplastics the most dangerous in this regard. Common plastics that contain and spread PBTs include polypropylene, used to make reusable plastic food containers and bottle caps, polystyrene, which is also called styrofoam, and polyethylene, used to make plastic bags and six-pack rings. And while we can see the direct harm that these plastics are causing to wildlife, we are only beginning to investigate the impacts to human health.
So where do microplastics come from? Large plastic waste is a major source of microplastics.
Regardless of size, as plastics linger in water, they physically break down into progressively smaller and smaller particles from UV sunlight and the abrasive action of waves. Unlike organic materials, plastics do not degrade entirely, though, so over time they become smaller and smaller, but also more and more prevalent in the environment.
Manufacturers have also deliberately added microplastics into cosmetics and cleansers, which then end up in our household wastewater. In this way, wastewater treatment facilities that process the dirty water from our homes and businesses can be another major way that microplastics enter the environment.
In 2015, the U.S. legislature acted in response to public pressure to address microbead pollution by voting for a federal ban on microbeads in rinse-off cosmetics like face scrubs and some over-the-counter drugs such as toothpaste. This action reduced one source of microplastic pollution.
However, another common household activity continues to contaminate our waters with microplastics. The tiny fibers that break off from synthetic fabrics when we do laundry, such as polyester and nylon.
Imogen Napper, a marine scientist at the University of Plymouth, found that in a typical wash, as many as 700,000 fibers could come off. The type of washing machine used also had an impact. Synthetic clothes washed in top-loading machines seem to shed more microplastics. As this graph illustrates, the world's fiber consumption has mostly been met by an increase in synthetic fibers over recent decades. Locally, a U.S. geological survey in 2016 found that the Huron River had the highest level of microplastics when compared to 28 other large Great Lake tributary watersheds. Furthermore, over 70% of the microplastics in rivers flowing to the Great Lakes come off of synthetic clothes and textiles. Local watershed councils are trying to learn more about microplastic pollution. The Huron River Watershed Council is testing water samples across the Huron River to try and find microplastic hotspots.
So how do we address all these microplastics getting into our environment? Experts recommend buying less clothing, washing our clothing less, and being more mindful of the textiles that are in the clothing that we buy, so that we can avoid fabrics like acrylic, polyester, nylon, and spandex. We can also encourage manufacturers to research alternatives, for government bodies to take legislative action, and get involved in local watershed councils, like the Huron River Watershed here in Ann Arbor. Another way that we can personally take action to reduce the amount of microplastics that are going out with our laundry water is to use microfiber capture balls, lint traps and filters, and mesh bags for our washing machines. These devices are designed to trap and collect those synthetic fibers and keep them from going out with the laundry water. Although these devices will reduce those microplastics getting out into the environment through our waters, we need to remember that they will end up going to a landfill. So it's still preferable to be thinking about using less of these plastic fibers in our everyday clothing.
Solutions to this issue go beyond the consumer, though, and need to be more systemic. Mark Brown, an environmental scientist at the University College Dublin, says washing machines need to be designed to reduce emissions of fibers to the environment, and at the moment they are not. Other solutions include calling on textile manufacturers to use different non-synthetic materials, such as cotton. The challenge is that these solutions need to be accessible to many people, and oftentimes synthetic clothing is more affordable.
At this time, 40% of all the plastic that's produced is actually single-use packaging waste. Now, this waste is one of those items that we can do something about through our choices in our home, but addressing the problem of plastic packaging waste really does require systemic action. At this point, 28 countries around the world have policies to try and reduce packaging waste. But here in the United States, we do not have that kind of action yet.
However, a year ago, on February 11th, senators and representatives from 4 states proposed a comprehensive national strategy to reduce plastic pollution, which is modeled after successful local and state initiatives. The Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2020 is designed to phase out single-use plastic products, hold corporations responsible for wasteful products by requiring that they design, manage, and finance waste and recycling operations, reduce packaging, and reform waste and recycling collection systems to reduce plastic impacts.
Ultimately, these kinds of policy actions can make a big difference, as happened in 2017 with the federal ban on microbeads in cosmetics. In the end, we need to think more consciously about how we as a society can work together to reduce the amount of plastic we're using on a daily basis, so we can address and eliminate the pollution in our communities, waterways, and planet.
Today we will be reusing plastic bottles to make feeders for wildlife. For today's craft, you will need a plastic bottle with a lid, 2 chopsticks, skewers, or thin sticks, a few push pins, some pointy scissors, a funnel, string, and some birdseed. Before we begin, make sure your bottle is empty, clean, and dry. And make sure to peel off the sticker or peel off the label of your bottle.
Step 1. Using a push pin, make 2 holes on the neck of the bottle directly across from each other. Step 2. Use a pencil tip or sharp scissors to make the holes a little bigger. Step 3. Next, feed the chopstick or skewer through one hole to the other side. This will be where the birds will stand. Step 4. Repeat steps 2 through 4. About 1 inch above the other holes, perpendicular to them, so that the chopsticks or skewers cross each other. Step 5. Use the push pin to make 4 holes, about 2 inches above each chopstick or skewer. Step 6. Make the holes a bit larger using a pencil tip or sharp scissors. This will be where the birds get their bird seed.
Now that you have a place for your birds to stand to get the food from, you need to find a way to hang your bottle up.
Step 7. Tie a piece of string around the base of the bottle with about a foot of string remaining. Step 8. Take the end of the string and tie it to the other side. Use a funnel to fill your bird feeder with bird seed.
And now you have a recycled bird feeder.